It just didn't look any way organised at all yesterday. As we said, the textbook seemed to have gone out the window in the first half. Everybody was everywhere. Like seeing Desi Dolan, who has played all his football, his whole career in corner forward, being back on his own 45-metre line, tackling lads in the first half when Westmeath had a strong wind in the first half and when they should have been putting their own presence on the game and attacking. It just looked really dysfunctional, and I don't think Westmeath have progressed anyway this year.
We had a feeling when the team was named midweek that John Heston was down at 14, was probably going to go out to midfield. But I would have thought when Desi was named to play in the corner as opposed to playing wing forward the last day, he was going to stick up there. That they were going to play a two-man full forward line, and you'd want Desi Dolan as close to goal as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the way that they tactically went at, was with a two-man full forward line with the wind, and the two men that they went with in the full forward line was Callum McCormick and Aidan Burke. And Aidan, with no experience at senior inter-county level, it was very, very surprising. You should be looking at your two best scorers in front of the goals, especially with a strong wind, which is Desi Dolan and John Heslin. And as I said, to see them two lads out around midfield, tackling, trying to get ball, was just... it was a terrible first half from Westmeath. Okay, we looked at one stage there, it was 20 minutes before Westmeath got their 4 point, and they kicked 4 points in 10 minutes going into half time. That was the first time in the first half that they actually imposed themselves on the game, and they started shooting from a bit distance because they constantly carried the ball into tackle and they constantly got turned over. Their support play coming from defence into the forwards was absolutely terrible. Lads getting turned over on the 45-metre line at Cavan with 3-4 Cavan men around them. It was very, very poor, and you'd wonder what have they done since the Louth game. They've played 2 challenge games, but it looks like they've done no training, to be honest.
Yeah, because that was interesting, because before the Louth game, Paul had said to us at the pre-match presser that they had moved very well in the challenge games before that, and he was saying to me on Thursday, the feeling was, with the exception of the couple of injuries they've picked up and the guys moving away, that a small group of players they had were in good shape, and he was very confident that they were going to get a result yesterday.
Yeah, well, we looked at here last week in studio, and I to be honest, I didn't give Westmeath much of a chance, because I thought that Eugene Keaton was going to be playing. I thought Divney was going to be out around midfield. I thought Keane Mackey was going to be starting. Now, when I got up there yesterday, I seen that these two, that Eugene Keaton and Keane Mackey, two All-Star nominees from last year, weren't starting. I said, Westmeath have a chance, and David Givney was playing in a full forward. I said, Westmeath have a chance here. But, as I said, it never materialised. Westmeath tried to go out and they just tried to nullify Cavan instead of, as I say, going out and expressing themselves. And I think that was the big thing that's caught Westmeath this year, is that when you go up into Division 1, there wasn't much expectation of Westmeath this season in Division 1. Why didn't they go out? Why didn't they express themselves? Why didn't they go out and attack teams instead of sitting back and doing what they've done for the last decade and defend inside their own 45? They didn't learn. Whereas if they went out and imposed themselves and tried to express themselves as footballers, they would have learned and maybe had a better championship campaign. But as regards yesterday, with the injuries that Westmeath picked up with Dorn Hart and Alan Giles during the weekend, and the loss of the players to America, they were very depleted on the sideline.
Which is unfortunate, because Paul had kind of admitted this week, the guys who went to America, he knew that John Egan was going to leave since the league, but he was taken a bit shocked with some of the other guys who left. But he admitted they were on the periphery of the panel, the likes of David McCormick and so on. So there's no great surprise that they leave. They knew they weren't going to play against Cavan. Yeah,
it was a surprise, I suppose. But then again, you have to look at if he was on the periphery of the panel, why did he bring him on again loud? And he done reasonably well when he came on again loud. So it's funny enough, but if David McCormick had to be around, he wouldn't have been playing anyway. He broke his nose a couple of weeks ago. So that was probably his decision to why he went to America. But, again, we spoke to Paul Beelan, and in his interview he said that Dennis Glennon had been carrying an injury for the last 5 or 6 weeks, and he named him to start, and then he didn't play him, but he brought him on. Not starting Dennis Glennon yesterday for me was absolutely crazy, because when Dennis came on, he imposed a little bit on the game. He got on a lot of ball. He started to run at the Cavan defence. Some of the decisions that Paul Beelan made yesterday were just crazy.
Midfield, how did it work? Because we spoke about that in the Louth game. It was a big problem area. It was against a very good Louth midfield. How did the lads that played around the middle of the park get on yesterday?
Realistically, they struggled in midfield, but what we did probably notice from it was that the Cavan midfielders never moved out between the 265s. They stayed there, so that meant that David Duffy was staying in the middle of the park, along with Paul Sherry, who picked up the midfield role. So they stayed there. They didn't, and to be honest, what they just done was they nullified each other, really. Neither... Probably Cavan midfield probably imposed themselves a little bit more. They attacked a little bit more. Whereas David Duffy and Paul Sherry seemed to be happy just to try to man-mark them and stay in the middle of the field. So once the Westmeath midfield weren't in the game, it opened up all that space around there to allow Cavan attack from the half-back line and get forward.
Well, does that curtail Paul Sherry's role then? Because Paul Sherry's best football over the last 3 or 4 years has probably been getting space at number 6 and going off on these runs where someone like David Duffy can then cover for him. You put him into midfield, he's maybe not able to be quite as dynamic as he is with space in front of him.
Yeah, definitely, and probably when they started John Gilligan yesterday, centre back, they should have maybe tried to get Paul Sherry maybe back up into the half forward line, because in the half forward line yesterday they lacked any real intense pace trying to go through that defensive mechanism of Cavan's. So if they had Paul Sherry just in that area that he could say, okay, just go and attack Paul, get the ball, do what you do best, and that's run at defence, go and do that. It might have opened up a lot of scoring opportunities for Westmeath yesterday, but as you said there, holding midfield, he had to stay with his man and he was nullified out of the game.
And then with Dennis Lennon not there, that takes away pace as well, because Dennis is not a young man anymore, but he still has a turn of pace. Yeah,
he still has that turn of pace, and if, with no disrespect to Callum McCormick, that's where Callum probably is his weakest point, is his pace and his strength to take on players. And as I said, with Aidan Burke in the full forward line yesterday, you had a player with no experience at senior and county level with a player who lacks pace in your full forward line. So it was very easy for Cavan to get back and turn over the ball and get that. Whereas again, if you had the experience of Desi in there and you had Dennis or John Hesselin in there, it could have been a different story for Westmeath.
Yeah, because putting Burke in was a big call. I saw the team sheets before the game and it was a slightly late start, so around 3 o'clock I saw the changes on the team. I was thinking, surely this is a massive, massive decision to make, to throw a guy in there fairly green.
Yeah, definitely, and in fairness, he got on a couple of balls, but he got blocked down 2 or 3 times, and it just showed that little lack of experience. And again, he was coming up again a team who were very defensively set up, so he was going to struggle. He just didn't have that experience. He had no league campaign games behind him, no Byrne Cup. And as I said to Jerry Russell yesterday, there's very few players who can step into a senior championship match and shine. And if he does, he's one of these guys that's who's going to go on and be a top 10 player in a couple of years. And unfortunately, it just didn't work out for Aidan yesterday.
Do you reckon we've seen Desi Dolan in a Westmeath shirt for the last time?
I think so. I think Desi's been a great servant for Westmeath, and he's probably raised the profile of Westmeath football over the course of the last 10 or 15 years. He can go with his head held high. He's had a great career. He's done Westmeath proud. I think now for Desi is probably the best time for him to go, because they've gone back to Division 2. It's time now for Westmeath to start looking to the future and start trying to bring as many young lads through. But I still believe that there is an element somewhere in there that Desi Dolan can help to bring the players forward, but I don't think it's from a playing point of view.
Well, he has his punditry, of course, with RT now at the moment as well, so that'll probably become a natural transition. I think he'll probably stay in the game no matter what. Very frustrated tweets from Dorn Hart after the game as well. He was very annoyed about the fact that the players were told to give back the shirt afterwards. And I suppose with Dorn it's been a very frustrating week because he picked up his injury as well. But it seemed a bit of an insult on top of injury for him there.
Yeah, definitely. Lads have trained hard all year, and at the end of the day, when you're beating out the championship, it's nice to have that little memory of holding on to your county jersey and having it at home, whatever the case may be. But to be asked, if you love your county, to give back your jersey, it doesn't really make much sense. It's like, what's a jersey, 30-40 euro to the county board? It's not going to make much of a difference. I thought it was a really silly thing by the county board.
Well, investment-wise, this is going to be interesting because we had the news this week that the planning permission period has now passed without objection, so the stand in Cusack Park is going to be completed. 3.5 million or so will be spent by the county board, albeit it'll be spread over a long period of time. Obviously that cuts down on the money that's going to be available to pay managements, to pay for development within the county and so on. Could this cause a problem for Westmeath now that they're on a slight downward slope, to know that the money mightn't be there?
Yeah, definitely, because I look at the Tyrone situation now. I know there hasn't been much of publicity about the reference to the Tyrone situation, because they're able to get grants from both British government and from the GA here. But there wasn't an issue earlier in the year with the Tyrone footballers where the players weren't getting their expenses and things like that, due to the fact that they were after putting a lot of money into the GPS system that they wear when they play games, and then the money that's going into their training facility. So this is going to, for a small county like Westmeath, this is going to be very financially tough for Westmeath. So they're either going to have to do some serious fundraising throughout the year and try to generate more money. Either that, or I can see there'll be a lot of issues. But the good thing about it is that they haven't gone massively. If we compare it to where Offaly went with almost 10 million, they're lucky enough that way. 3.5 million is a lot of money, but if they can manage it right and do a lot of fundraising, they might be lucky enough to keep their head above water.
Yeah, I suppose if the added problem of what happened with the Hillamar sponsorship disappearing a couple of years ago, which was one of the biggest sponsorship deals around, and I think they had to write some of that off after what happened, which is unfortunate too. In terms of Paul Beelan's future then, as we'll hear from the interview in a moment with him, he's pretty convinced he's going to be around next year. All vibes out of the county board this year is that Paul Beelan will be afforded time. A lot of supporters think he shouldn't be afforded time. Where would you stand on the debate there?
I would look at from the point of view is that if we go back to the whole start of the saga of him coming in, he was entitled to go for the job. The job was opened up. It was a poor decision by the county board to make the job tenable. It was a poor appointment in the first place, I think, with Paul Beelan for a manager to go in who had no experience of Division 1 football and no experience of Westmeath football. Looking at the league campaign, looking at the O'Byrne Cup campaign and looking at the Championship campaign, 12 games, no win. I think that says a lot compared to where Westmeath have been for the last 3 or 4 years with successful league campaigns. We can we'll say mediocre Championship display. I don't think he's the right man for Westmeath. I know he said yesterday he's adamant for a 3-year plan due to the age group of the players that's there, but I just can't see it being a positive thing for the future.
What worried me a lot from the outset, it seemed like the National League Division 1 was being written off before Westmeath even kicked the ball.
Yeah, definitely, and I think, the consensus last year in Division 2, when Westmeath were playing well in Division 2, was that a lot of Westmeath supporters said that they didn't want Westmeath to go up into Division 1, that what was going to happen was exactly what did materialise this year. But what I would say is, would it have materialised if Pat Flanagan had to be left there? Now, I know throughout the year I've been going on about the whole Pat Flanagan set-up and regime there, but he had the experience of the players of 3 or 4 years. He knew what was going to be required for them players to go to Division 1. It mightn't have been a successful campaign, but it would have been, I think, a lot more better than what it was.
You see, because what I found interesting is the way I stood on it was, I felt, look, it was unfortunate for Pat Flanagan. He didn't get to manage in Division 1 after taking them from Division 3. But a Championship record for me, I could understand that the county board wanted to replace him. My thought was, if you're going to go and replace your manager, you've got to get a Division 1 standard manager there. Westmeath had to be a reasonably attractive prospect, albeit they would have been one of the favourites for relegation. They were still in the top 10 or 12 counties in the country. Surely they could have attracted a better coach than a rookie like Paul Beelan, who only had a bit of club experience behind him, and in many cases short club experiences behind him.
Yeah, definitely, and as you said, top managers want to be managing Division 1 teams, and they would have seen the age profile of the Westmeath team and what they probably could have done with that Westmeath team if they got them and moved forward. As I said, I just felt that was a bad appointment, and probably from Pat Flanagan's point of view on it would have been was that he went to the county board, he said, right, this is my 3-4 year plan, take them from Division 3 to Division 1 and then we'll work from the Championship then. I think the biggest thing was a lack of patience on it, that they wanted success and they wanted the success straight away, instead of saying, okay, the man has his 3-4 year plan, let's roll with it, let's see what goes. At least he deserved another year here. But definitely, in terms of Paul Beelan being involved this year, it was a bad call. They really needed, if they were going to, when they replaced Pat Flanagan, they needed a real high profile manager again. Again, another Paddy O'Shea or someone of that ilk.
A lot of Westmeath supporters are thinking maybe Tommy Carr is being set up now as the next manager, and from anyone who was tweeting last night, there was a lot of concern about the idea of Tommy Carr moving from the minors to the seniors. How would you feel if that was the way they were thinking of going? Say if Paul Beelan was to go this year or next year, would Tommy Carr be the right man to replace him? Well,
look, I made no bones about it earlier in the year. I felt that this was only a stepping stone for Paul Beelan, for Tommy Carr to step in next year. That Tommy Carr felt, having 10 of last year's minor team that was in a Leinster final, go this year, hopefully win a Leinster minor, and that'll be his guarantee for the senior job. That didn't materialise. The minors had a terrible year. Tommy Carr had a terrible year. And the thing I look at Tommy Carr too is Tommy Carr has been the only Dublin manager since 1995 that hasn't won a Leinster title with a Dublin team, and he was in charge of them for 3 years. So it doesn't look good for Tommy Carr. He doesn't have that managerial experience. So for me, that would be an extremely poor call. As bad as we are going backwards, it's another step back again.
Interesting for Westmeath next year, leaving the management and everything to one side, just in terms of the team. Generally, teams who do well on the back of a year before. So Westmeath had a good league campaign into another good league campaign into another good one. Westmeath are coming off the back of a miserable year where they couldn't buy a win. I would imagine confidence is going to be very low when they rejoin around November or December of this year. Can you see them turn it around and then being a Division 2 contender next year? Or is there a possibility that they might struggle in Division 2 even?
Well, look, they could struggle, but I suppose if you look at maybe Donegal, who came off the All-Ireland 2 years ago, and they got relegated from Division 1 last year. Now we can say they had a long season the year before, and they were probably concentrating again on the Championship. Westmeath need to forget about this year now. They really need to say, right, okay, it was a dismal year, it didn't happen for us. They have to realise that they are good enough to be competing again at Division 2. Probably a more realistic division that they're good enough to go in. But for them, they really need to be consolidating Division 2 again next year and trying to be a top 3 finish rather than going out and looking to get promoted again.